Welcome to Fantasy Football Today Dynasty. I am your host, Heath Cummings, and today it's a one-man mailbag. That's right. You guys did a fantastic job. I've got some emails, I've got some tweets, and as always, at the end of the show, I'll get to as many of your YouTube questions as I can. We've already got a great question about QBs and Superflex. I saw some Derrick Henry concerns in the chat. I don't understand this fumbling thing, but we're going to try not to overreact. I do want to start with a special treat for you guys. Before we get to the questions, I went through, got my Dynasty rankings updated yesterday. And I thought, I wonder what the top 12 rookies look like in my rankings now. We had a question on Sunday night's podcast. I said, believe it or not, Emeka Egbuka should have been the number one pick in rookie drafts. Jamie said, believe it. I do not believe it. He's not my number one. He is certainly one of the big risers. At 101, I still have Ashton Genty. I know it's been 3 very bad games, but we've got to remember, even with running backs, we're talking about 5-year careers here, 6-year careers here, hopefully even longer for Genty. I'm not going to overreact too much to 3 games. I had a similar problem with Travis Hunter. We'll get to where he is later. But he is still the 101 for me. Omarion Hampton, the 102. And another guy I'm being patient with, Trevion Henderson, the 103. 3 running backs still at the top of the top 12 in Dynasty for me amongst this rookie class. I think it's important to remember that we all thought coming into this year, this was a great running back class and the wide receivers weren't quite as good. The wide receivers, a couple of them have been pretty fantastic. I'm still going to have 3 running backs at the top. 4 through 6 are all wide receivers, though. Teteroa McMillan, Emeka Egbuka, Travis Hunter. Man, I couldn't decide how far to drop Travis Hunter because, again, it's 3 games. Do you know how many great wide receivers, how many of the top 10 wide receivers in my Dynasty rankings right now were not very good the first 3 games in the NFL? A lot of them. I've been disgusted by what I've seen from the Jacksonville pass game so far. I've been disgusted by Hunter's usage the last 2 weeks. He has dropped from 102 to 106 for me, but he is still a top 6 pick in the top 12. So the top 6, Genty, Hampton, Henderson, Teteroa McMillan, Egbuka, and Hunter. Jacob Gibbs, I saw just before the show, had a great tweet about what a big test this could be for Egbuka. His separation metrics don't actually look that good so far. He scored some touchdowns. He made some phenomenal catches last week. But if it's really a hobbled Chris Godwin working his way back and Egbuka as the number 1 wide receiver against the Philadelphia Eagles, we will learn a little bit more about Egbuka in week number 4. Number 7, Quinshon Judkins. This is not far from where he was for me back in April. He had a little dip, of course, over the offseason, but he's back now. And, he may be better than some of these guys rest of season. Tyler Warren's number 8 for me. Matthew Golden, number 9. Colston Loveland, Harold Fannin, Luther Burden at number 12. Burden was a very polarizing prospect and was very polarizing in rookie drafts. I think I saw him go everywhere from 108 to like 204. Very slow start, but I will say the performance we saw in week 3 with just a little bit more usage and a big explosive play, those are the kinds of things I like to see out of high upside rookies. So again, the top 12 for me amongst the rookies, Genty, Hampton, Henderson, McMillan, Egbuka, Hunter, Judkins, Warren, Golden, Loveland, Fannin, Burden. Let's get to your emails. Brett sent in an email. I'm in a 12-team Dynasty Best Ball League. I finished runner-up last year and expect to finish top 4 at worst. My QBs are Burrow, Mayfield, Wilson, and Young. I really like having 4 QBs in best ball. Now he only has 3 because of the Burrow injury, and Bryce Young's not been very good, and Russell Wilson's about ready to get benched. Would it be a terrible idea to look at trading Burrow to a team not competing this year for someone like a Jordan Love? Now, we talked about this on last week's show, and one of the reasons I wanted to read this email is because I do think this is a common problem for a lot of contenders. I have a team I thought was a true contender this year that lost Joe Burrow in Superflex. And so I think a lot of people are going through this. If you look at my dynasty quarterback rankings, you will see Jordan Love one spot ahead of Joe Burrow because of that contender factor. Now, I think the only question I would have with that, yes, I think you could. It's not a terrible idea, but you said you expect to finish top 4 at worst. I would really like to feel like if I have Jordan Love, I have one of the top 2 teams in the league if I'm making that move. Because I do think you will not feel good about it in 2026 and beyond, but flags fly forever. Not a terrible move. I'd probably first see if I could get it done for Caleb Williams. But if I can't, then yeah, I think not a terrible move there. Daniel sent in an email. How do you approach teams that are likely playoff bound but not likely to compete for a championship this year? I'm not sure I need to tear down and rebuild, but I also don't have a ton of draft capital to ship out for win now talent. And that's kind of a place that I think a lot of people, I talk all the time about, I want to be contending or I want to be rebuilding. And sometimes you get stuck in the middle. And I think one of the most important factors in which direction you move is the age of your roster. How many of your starters, how many of your best players do you feel really confident are going to be good in 2 years? And if it's an older team and you don't think you're a contender and you don't have a lot of draft capital, then I do think it's time to rebuild. If it's a younger team, then maybe it's time to take a couple of chances. Now, his question was, would you trade Amon-Ra St. Brown for Emeka Egbuka and the 2026 201? I've got quite a bit of difference in the most recent trade chart. That will be on Sportsline, likely on Wednesday. But if I just check over on the trade chart, Amon-Ra St. Brown, who has been fantastic so far this year, worth 28.5 points on the Superflex trade chart, 20.7 for Egbuka. So I think that's really pretty close to the value of a 2026 or 2027 first for me. 2026 201. I don't feel confident enough about the depth of this class to make this move. It obviously makes you younger, but Amon-Ra St. Brown is one of those guys that is not exactly old yet anyways. He'll turn 26 in October. So I really feel like you might be making your team worse for the next 3 years by making that move. So probably not the type of move I'm making if I've got a good but not great roster. Brian is a contender in a 12-team Superflex, 2 wide receiver, 2 flex league. He traded Tony Pollard and his 2026 first for A.J. Brown and Josh Downs. He says he's a little thin at running back now after Bijan and Kyron, has Jaylen Warren as his RB3 and basically nobody as his RB4. Absolutely love that move. Tony Pollard doesn't like looking a lot like DeAndre Swift right now, the high volume, very few fantasy points producer. And he's at an age to where we don't have a lot of hope that he's going to be good for maybe more than one more year after this. A.J. Brown with a great bounce back last week. I'd give that trade an A. I see a lot of questions coming in on the chat. Want to remind all of you, I know there's a lot of people that are not watching on YouTube, but watching over on Twitter. If you have questions for me, the end of the show, I will be answering questions from the chat. I can't see your questions, though, if you're asking them on Twitter right now. So come on over to YouTube. We'll get those questions answered for you. Let's take our first break. We'll get to some questions from social media.
Sunday, you can count on CBS Sports getting down with the fantastic slate of games. But first, a little fun when we throw it back to celebrate 50 years of the NFL today. Count on Sunday with the NFL on CBS and Paramount Plus.
We are back, and I just figured out I had the wrong mic on, so I probably sound a lot better to you guys now. It's good to have you all here. Wizzy sent in a question, 3-0, win now team. But his tight ends are Isaiah Likely, Jatavian Sanders, Pat Freiermuth, and Michael Mayer. Should I accept trading a 26 or 27 first-round pick for George Kittle? 3-0 sounds really good. Those tight ends sound really bad. I have just I'm always about go win it if you can. And Kittle could be the kind of guy that does that for you. I am a little bit concerned about trading a first-round pick for a tight end who's probably going to be 32 before he's back on the field and dealing with a hamstring injury. So I might be trying to see if I could trade for a tight end one that was, just not quite as far at the end of his career. Looking at my tight end rankings, George Kittle's currently tight end 17, which feels really low, but he's also not playing right now. Like, go see what Jake Ferguson costs. This would kind of be my thought. And his price went up this week with the CD Lamb injury, but he's been ahead of George Pickens in targets basically every game this year. I think Jake Ferguson's going to be a good starter, might actually cost you just a little bit less, and should have some production after this year. Dolphin Cat in the chat says trade for Kraft, and he just came off of a bad game, but he's also 24, and he had that great game in week 2. So I'm not sure how much Tucker Kraft's going to cost or how available he is. I would agree that I'd rather trade for Tucker Kraft than Jake Ferguson. I'd like to do a price check on Sam Laporta after he's been disappointing to start the year, see how much he costs. If I was going to trade a first-round pick for George Kittle, it would be the 26 and not the 27, because you already know you're 3-0. You already feel pretty confident you're not going to have a good pick this year. You don't really know what that 2027 pick's going to look like, and we like the 2027 rookie class quite a bit more than we do the 2026 class. Colin says, what's the deal? What's the deal with Quentin Johnston? Is he a buy or a sell? Is he a must start going forward? I think this is directly correlated to how worried you are about Ladd McConkey. And I think I had him as a 1 out of 10 on the worryometer 2 weeks ago. And that might be up to a 3 now. Quentin Johnston, one of a handful of wide receivers to score at least 14 PPR fantasy points in every game. He had success against Pat Surtain last week. He's just turning out to be a good wide receiver, and the drops are not as big of a problem as they have been in the past. I am more likely to buy Quentin Johnston than I am to sell. It's hard to get a good idea of where everybody's at on players in terms of the consensus ranking. Johnston is my wide receiver 33 right now. Do still think there's upside for him to move higher. I wouldn't quite call him a must-start player, just 7 targets in 2 of his 3 games, which isn't bad. But again, for a guy that normally has a 58% catch rate and has a 58% catch rate this year, 7 targets a game generally means 4 catches a game. You're going to need a touchdown most weeks for that to be good. I'd call him a boom-bust number 3 wide receiver. I do have him ahead of some of those guys like Jamison Williams now, after Williams has gotten off to a slow start. But one important thing to remember, he just turned 24 years old. It feels like we've been doing this Quentin Johnston thing for longer than we have. Was good at times in year 2 and has been great to open the season. Buy, but not quite too high and not quite must start. Steven asked a question. These types of things, I think, drive dynasty managers crazy. Which late round flyer running backs are on the cutting block if you've got to make room? I don't want to cut guys like Devin Neal this early, but all these injuries are forcing me to add players that can fill in and produce now. Which flyer running backs are we holding on to at all costs? So just looking through my dynasty running back rankings, obviously Ollie Gordon popped last week, so nobody's thinking about dropping him anymore. Jordan James is probably my highest ranked rookie running back that's not done anything yet, followed by Trevor Etienne, then Devin Neal. Those guys are all right around the RB 50 range. DJ Giddens is in that group, but I think the thing is this is probably a different question if you're contending or if you're rebuilding, and you're talking about filling in for injuries. So you're clearly contending. I think the first distinction to make with these flyer rookie running backs is how many injuries are they away from really helping your fantasy team? The problem for a guy like Devin Neal and probably even Trevor Etienne and Jordan James, those guys are probably 2 injuries away. McCaffrey and Robinson would both have to go down for James. We'd have to see Rico Dowdle and Chuba Hubbard go down for Etienne. Alvin Kamara and Kendre Miller for Devin Neal. Whereas a guy like Taj Brooks, if you're a contender, he probably is just a Chase Brown injury away from helping your team. So if you're contending, I would probably focus at this point a little bit for the guys that have done nothing. I would focus a little bit more on the depth chart and what type of crazy thing. I mean, we've already seen so many crazy things happen this year. What type of crazy thing has to happen for him to help my fantasy team? And if it's more than one, then you can probably start thinking about getting rid of them. If you are a rebuilder and you have those guys, I just want to hold the guys that I think are the best and have the most upside, because we haven't seen anything to disprove that yet. Justin has Omarion Hampton in a super flex league. I mean, congratulations on that. Feel like he has Christian McCaffrey, Alvin Kamara, Trey Benson, and other running backs. The Justin Jefferson manager wants Hampton. Would Hampton and an early 2026 second or a 2028 first be too much or too little for Jefferson? So I think it's been a little bit of a discouraging start to the year for Justin Jefferson, and I'm a little bit concerned about JJ McCarthy. I still have Jefferson worth 33 points on the trade chart, which in comparison to 25.6 for Hampton. I'd love to try to trade an early second with Hampton for Jefferson. Value-wise, I think the 2028 first, like, it's so far away that it feels like it's an okay deal. I just hate trading away first that far in advance. You could be in a rebuild by 2027, and it'd feel pretty gross to not have your first round pick. So see if you can get it done for that second round pick. I don't think it's quite enough. Maybe you could do 2 seconds if he really wants Hampton, but see if you can get that done. Dynasty Wolf says, what do you do in leagues where you're off to an unexpected hot start? I've got one of these with tons of picks and no running backs. I have Breece Hall as my only viable starter. 5 2026 firsts, 3 2027 firsts, but so far no one wants to part with running backs. Would you overpay for help or commit to the rebuild? I'm not quite to the decision-making stage with those teams. With the teams there, I've got 3 or 4 teams that I came into the year that I didn't actually know if they were going to have a chance to contend this year. I've got leans on in one direction or the other, and you guys probably do too. It sounds like in this one, you thought this team's not going to be that good. Now they've surprised you, and they are. I probably am not changing directions quite yet. So 5 2026 firsts in a class that we're really pretty unsure about, I wouldn't be hesitant at all to give up one of those for a running back starter. If you get to the point to where you have to give up 2, then it needs to be a younger guy that you really feel like is going to help you this year. The problem is if you have Breece Hall as your only starting running back, if you want to be a true contender, you should have at least 3 guys at the running back position you feel really good about starting. So you almost need to go get 2, and that gets pretty expensive. So I'd probably stand pat for another week or 2 and see how things shake out. If you get to 4-1, then it gets to be an easier decision. If you get to 3-2, it's a little bit more difficult. But I don't want to do too much changing direction. And that goes for contenders as well. If I had a team I thought was going to be really good and they've just looked bad through the first 3 weeks, I'm going to give it another couple of weeks before I make that change. The first 3 weeks are certainly more predictive than the first 2, but we don't know everything yet. Patrick, with all the bad vibes on social media, is Tre Harris this year's Jermaine Burton? Oof. I'm holding Tre Harris. I'm not expecting anything this year, but the vibes have not been good. They weren't good in training camp. Sounds like he got outplayed by Keandre Lambert-Smith early on. Quentin Johnston is clearly not going anywhere. And Ladd McConkey obviously isn't either. So I don't think like this is a situation where you have a lot of outs with Tre Harris, but he was still a very talented prospect. And it's still 3 games into his NFL career. And if I was in a dynasty league and I saw that somebody dropped him, I would certainly be adding him. So let's just hold on to him. It'd be great if we had started him out in the practice squad spot, taxi squad spot, so we don't have to look at that lack of production on a weekly basis. But I'm going to hold on Tre Harris and hope he's not Jermaine Burton. Brent says, is Brian Thomas Jr. a falling asset or a buy low at this point? Can I say both? And then he asks, is it an injury or a Trevor problem? Can I say both? It sounds like Brian Thomas Jr. has a wrist injury. He definitely currently has a Trevor Lawrence problem. He's also one of the most difficult guys for me to rank going into week 4. Because if you look at his box score, and I'm sure Jacob Gibbs has got some thoughts going beyond the box score, it doesn't look good. By the way, go listen to that podcast. Fantastic. I'm sure all of you are. But he has more targets per game than he had in his rookie year. He's averaging more yards per catch per game than he did his rookie year. Last year, he caught 65% of his targets. This year, he's caught 29% of his targets. Now, like in Quentin Johnston's worst day, I was still projecting a 50% catch rate for him. If Brian Thomas Jr. had a 50% catch rate right now, he'd be doing much better, obviously. And so he's still a top 20 wide receiver for me this week. He's still a top 12 wide receiver for me in Dynasty. And I would be buying Brian Thomas Jr. at a discount. I wouldn't be paying as much for him as I would have a month ago, but I still am going to bet on that. I loved the profile going into last year. The production was fantastic as a rookie. I think this thing will get figured out as we go on. And listen, my biggest concern coming in was that Travis Hunter was going to be too much of a problem. That might have been a problem in week 1. It certainly hasn't been the last 2 weeks. I'd expect some positive regression in terms of the catch rate for Brian Thomas Jr. Hopefully he gets healthy. Hopefully he gets on the same page with Trevor Lawrence. Tony, man, but I didn't realize I did this, but before I hope you guys in the chat have some more positive questions, because back to back on the negativity about wide receivers. Tony asks, is it time to get out on Marvin Harrison Jr. before the narrative becomes this is who he is? And to Tony's point, I think it's worth just looking at the stats. As a rookie, Marvin Harrison Jr. averaged 14.3 yards per catch. This year, he's averaging 14.2. As a rookie, he averaged 52 receiving yards per game. This year, he's averaging 47. The catch rate's up a little bit. We are seeing a few more in breaking routes and shorter targets for Marvin Harrison Jr. It's just not really turning into production. He's, again, like Brian Thomas Jr., I think I'm probably ahead of consensus on Harrison. He's still a top 12 wide receiver for me. I'm not selling low, but if somebody comes in with a similar evaluation and believes he's still going to the moon, remember, a lot of people had him including myself, had him as a top 5 dynasty wide receiver when he was drafted. I'm not sure that's going to happen with Kyler Murray. But I don't want, if you were going to sell Marvin Harrison Jr., you should have done it after the spike week. I feel pretty confident there's another spike week coming, maybe this week, maybe in the next 2 or 3 weeks. If you want to get out on him, at least wait for that to happen. Now let's see. We got a few questions from the chat. I'm sure we do. And we've got a lot of rest of season questions, guys. Come on, let's get some dynasty questions in here. Somebody says, would you take this trade, giving up Teteroa McMillan, getting Ladd McConkey? So there's a guy who's been a big riser in Teteroa McMillan. Ladd, a big faller. Looking at my updated dynasty wide receiver rankings, which will be out at cbssports.com on Wednesday. I currently have Teteroa McMillan at wide receiver 13, Ladd McConkey at wide receiver 16. So I would not accept Ladd straight up. I would probably be asking, what is it that you guys would be willing to throw in on that deal? Let's get to a question we had. I love it when I show up for the show and there's a question already waiting. I get that. If you guys want to make me smile, just go ahead and do that before the show. We got a massive dynasty trade question. I've got Fields, Love, and Bo Nix at QB. Got an offer, Justin Herbert for Nix, a late 2026 first, and Woody Marks. Pushing in for Empire Pot. Would you do it? So in my there's been some discouraging things about Bo Nix through 3 weeks. He's still ranked as a starter for me this week. I'm giving him another week, but he has an 80% catchable attempt rate so far in this season. The only quarterback through 3 weeks that has a lower rate Russell Wilson. So Bo Nix has not been near as good as he was early in the year. I have Justin Herbert as QB7 in my updated dynasty ranks. Bo Nix is down to QB 14. So we've got kind of a riser and a faller. That 2026 first seems like a lot when I first hear it. And the difference between those guys is only 5 points in the trade chart. It's obvious that you'd rather have Herbert this year. At least that's the way that it looks through 3 weeks. I don't think I'd give up a first, Woody Marks, and Nix for Herbert, but it is close, and I wouldn't fault you too much if you decided to do that. Ernesto wants to know, I didn't mention Cam Skattebo in the top 12 rookie rankings, but he's pushing there. He could get there for sure. Do we just give Skattebo the keys to our team? Trust him week in and week out on a 10-team PPR league? Have Walker, Javonte, and Mason. Yeah, in a 10-team league with those options, I'm not quite ready to give the keys to him. This week, I would start Ken Walker over him, and I think Jordan Mason, Javonte Williams, and Cam Skattebo in full PPR are all very, very close. I will be really interested to see what the usage is when Tracy is back. I think Skattebo is probably the lead back in that offense. I'm not sure that he dominates touches like he did on Sunday night against the Chiefs. And I don't know how much of his target volume in that game was just the fact that the Giants could not find a way to get a wide receiver open, so they just continually dumped it off. I certainly wouldn't expect him to see the volume that he saw in that game. It's fun to watch him run. I also think the way that he runs makes me really concerned that he's going to really struggle with injuries in the NFL. So it's a high upside on a weekly basis and maybe a lower floor than people realize for dynasty purposes. Just looking at my running back ranks, I've got Cam Skattebo has moved up to, we're going to pause for just a minute while I put the old F5 in there. Cam Skattebo is RB26. So I think I would still rather have RJ Harvey in this rookie class. He's just ahead of Bashal Tutin, but certainly one of the biggest risers, a great outcome for him on Sunday night, and I am starting him this week. Steven asks, what am I supposed to do with Anthony Richardson? Would you trade him or hold? I'm probably the wrong guy to ask. I've been too high on Anthony Richardson. I was too low on Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones is playing outstanding football. I'm not dropping him in a super flex league. I'm just holding at this point. I don't think you can get anything for him in trade. Be curious, like, what are you going to get, a third-round pick offered to you? I'm not giving up the upside of Anthony Richardson for a pick that I don't really expect to help me. I don't want to drop him just in case something happens. Daniel Jones has had more than a couple of injuries in his NFL career, and I think if Richardson gets a chance to start, we'll definitely be starting him in Superflex. We may be starting him in 1 QB. So at this point, I'm just holding Anthony Richardson. It doesn't feel great. Quentin Johnston and Harold Fannin for Teteroa McMillan and Jawan Johnson. I would give those two players up for those two players, yes. I don't think you're probably going to get that done. It sounds maybe more like a redraft deal. I do love Harold Fannin. I sent some tweets out this morning. Joe Flacco averaging more yards per attempt to Harold Fannin than any other player on the Browns. I was really disappointed by the target volume in week 3, but when he had the ball, he looked very good with it. So I'm not looking to sell Harold Fannin this week. I think there's probably another big game coming at some point in the near future. But that deal right there, if I can get Teteroa McMillan and have Jawan Johnson for this year, I would get that deal done. Killer Potato Fish, tearing it down, traded Nico and Bryce for Burrow and a third. Is that a win? So let's look at the trade chart. And I'm going to assume this is a super. Nico's 25 points on the trade chart. Bryce Young 22, so that's 47. Burrow has fallen to 32, and so no, I'm not sure that's a win, although a lot of Burrow's decline is based on his lack of production this year, and he's going to be a 40-point value again, probably at the start of 2026. So with that type of context, I think it's a fair deal. I would have liked to have gotten a second there instead of a third. I just don't really want to trade Nico Collins away. Let's take one more break, and then we got a few more questions as we finish off the show.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you. When you need your sports in a snap, find it on CBS Sports HQ, streaming free anywhere you are.
Rob, thank you so much. Rob helps us out so much here at CBS, and he's helping me out because we've not talked about Trey Benson, and we should talk about Trey Benson. Is he the starting running back in Arizona next year? I believe so. And listen, it's terrible what happened to James Conner. He's had a fantastic career, fantastic story, all that he's overcome. Wouldn't want to doubt him coming back next year. It's just that he's going to be 31 next year. Trey Benson was a running back I liked a lot coming out of the NFL draft. He's looked good in limited action this year. I think he has a chance to be a top 15 running back rest of season. He was already a guy, and we talked about this a lot across the summer, that this was a guy I wanted to buy. Now, I'm not giving myself too much credit because the guy I put in the same category was Braylon Allen, and that's not working out very well. But Trey Benson was RB 24 for me a year ago. He was RB 27 for me last week in Dynasty. He's up to RB 13 right now. I think he's going to be a very good starter for you this year. I expect him to be a very good starter for the foreseeable future, doing more in the passing game this year than what we saw from him last year. And this Arizona offense has been a good one for running back production. So very excited about Trey Benson. Plan on starting to him. If you're committing to the rebuild, what's the age cutoff roughly for running backs and wide receivers, where you start looking to trade those assets off for draft picks? Great question, Billy, and thank you. First off, running backs, I think you can always be looking to deal in a rebuild, just because that, like, even really young top 10 running backs, there's a lot of fluctuation in that value and a lot of things that can go wrong in just a 12-month period. And if you're looking at a 2-year rebuild, there's no telling what the top 12 is going to look like at running back in 2 years. I would certainly be looking. I've got some really tough decisions to make with Jonathan Taylor at 26. Any running back over 25, I wouldn't want on my roster, and I wouldn't really be looking to acquire running backs until my team feels ready to compete. At wide receiver, it's probably 27 and older, maybe 28. And again, this depends on if you're thinking this is going to be a quick retool, I'm going to be good again next year, then it's probably 28. If you're looking at a 2-year rebuild, I would say it's 27, and the type of wide receiver matters also, but those are kind of some rough ages, and tight ends probably about the same as wide receiver. I think we have one more question here in the chat, and then I'll check and make sure there's not any new ones that have just popped up. But Nolan says, how much fab to spend on Ferg or Hunter Henry? Okay, we snuck a redraft question in here. I have Brock Bowers. Would like to outbid league mates and trade them. I'm more optimistic about Ferguson than I am Henry rest of season. I might go 10% on Ferguson. I might go 5% on Henry. You guys, let's see if we got any more dynasty questions just to finish out. Billy was clarifying he's in a long rebuild. So yeah, maybe change that running back to 24 instead of 25. And the wide receiver will just say you can keep the guys 26 and younger. But that's here's a good question. It's a kind of a redraft question, but also a dynasty question. Jordan Addison's back, so that's fantastic. I'm not starting him this week if I can avoid it. I want to see what this looks like with Carson Wentz. Addison is a top 20 dynasty wide receiver for me once again. I think maybe somebody, though, that if you're a true contender, you're looking to deal because the future may be better than this year is with Carson Wentz and JJ McCarthy at quarterback, and McCarthy's still kind of learning how to play the position. But Addison is somebody I'm very excited to have back, just somebody that I feel better about on my bench than on my starting lineup. We did get a question, better long-term asset, trade or Travion Henderson. Appreciate you guys having patience with me with the cough button today. It's still Travion Henderson for me. He is still a top 10 dynasty running back for me. I'm going to try to make a couple of trade offers to see if I can add Travion Henderson to at least one more dynasty team. I still believe in his talent, and 3 games is not enough to learn much of anything. Henderson, again, RB8 for me in my current dynasty rankings. Benson, RB13. Love both those guys. The one place I might take Benson if I was on a true contender, but I'd really like to hold on to Henderson if I can. That's going to do it for my voice and the one-man mailbag. Thank you guys for sending in all the chats. Thank you to Nada for making everything work. We will talk to you next Tuesday.